And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Podcast on the Brink, your weekly dose of Indiana University basketball news and discussion. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. Podcast on the Brink is a joint production of the Assembly Call and Inside the Hall. For complete coverage of IU basketball, visit assemblycall.com and insidethehall.com. This episode of Podcast on the Brink is brought to you by Crane Credit Union. Get a $150 deposit into your new Crane Credit Union checking account when you get e-statements, have direct deposit, and use your debit card. Plus, there's no monthly service charges and no minimum balance to open your account. Stop in at any of Crane Credit Union's 14 locations or visit their website at cranecu.org for more information. That's cranecu.org. Crane Credit Union is federally insured by NCUA. On this week's edition of Podcast on the Brink, Alex has the week off, but I'm joined by Josh Margolis, our student intern at Inside the Hall and the Assembly Call. And Josh was out in LA last weekend at the Nike EYBL tournament, and so he has a lot of insight for us watching up close Indiana targets like Nas Carter and Cole Swider and Keon Brooks and Trendon Watford and others. So we get that insight from Josh, and he and I also give you some of our takeaways from Archie Miller's comments at the Hoosiers Winery event, which went on Wednesday night. A lot of really interesting comments there from Archie, and so we give you some thoughts on that. All of that coming up on this week's episode of Podcast on the Brink. Hey, real quick, a word about this week's sponsor, SeatGeek. Buying tickets to sports and concerts can be complicated, but there is a better, simpler way to buy with SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the smartest, easiest way to get tickets to live events, because with SeatGeek's seamless mobile experience, you can buy and sell tickets in just 2 taps. SeatGeek helps you find the best seats at the best prices, fully guaranteed. There really is nothing quite like seeing your favorite team or musician in person, and SeatGeek will get you closer to the action for a great value. I have SeatGeek on my phone, and it's by far the easiest way that I've found to shop for tickets. I can be anywhere, and like I just mentioned, with just a few taps, I can instantly find seats to anything that I want to go to. I actually used SeatGeek to buy tickets earlier this year to see Yogi play here in Dallas. I bought my wife concert tickets for the summer. So SeatGeek is designed to make your ticket buying experience easier than ever. They save you time and money by searching multiple ticket sites to compare prices and find amazing deals. Now, here's how to get an even better deal, which is Podcast on the Brink listeners get $20 off of your first SeatGeek purchase. Download the SeatGeek app, enter the promo code BRINK, B-R-I-N-K today, and you'll get $20 back from SeatGeek. That's promo code BRINK, B-R-I-N-K. And now, on with this week's episode of Podcast on the Brink. We're joined on this episode of Podcast on the Brink by Josh Margolis, who started with us as an intern last year and is continuing in that capacity now, both Inside the Hall and the Assembly Call. Josh, welcome to Podcast on the Brink.
Good to be back. Thank you.
Yes, and you are also the host of Ball Isn't Life, which is a podcast that kind of takes IU media members and allows people to get to know them a little bit beyond the work that they do when it comes to IU basketball. So I highly recommend that. And I have to lead you off with this question. When in the world is Alex Bozich going to be featured on Ball Isn't Life? Season
2. Coming up this starting this fall. Expect Alex and several other prominent IU media members on the show in the coming months.
Very nice. Well, that's Ball Isn't Life for folks who want to listen to it. Always a very entertaining listen. And speaking of IU media members, pretty much every IU basketball media member was in one place last night, and that was at the annual event at Hoosiers Winery. Archie Miller had an opportunity to meet with the media and then, of course, to address a room full of Indiana fans. There were about 900 Indiana fans there in attendance, according to reports. And really, I think several important takeaways from the event. The biggest one to me is Archie talked about the work that guys have been doing this summer, or really this spring, I guess, so far, since school ended. And he said that, they gave players the option of going and spending 4 weeks at home, kind of clear their heads, rest up, get recovered, and then ready to come back and get to work. And obviously a lot of the players took Archie up on that, but 5 players decided to stay in Bloomington and really commit to getting a head start on work with new strength and conditioning coach Cliff Marshall, get as much work in the gym as possible. Those 5 guys, Deron Davis, Robert Johnson, Colin Hartman, Curtis Jones, and Juwan Morgan. And Archie really had a lot of positive things to say about all 4 of them, or all 5 of those guys. So that's obviously a good sign, especially, a guy like Deron, who we know that so much is going to be expected of him. He's going to be counted on for so much as really Indiana's only big guy down low, and to hear that he has really taken to Archie's goals for him in terms of changing his body and strength and conditioning. He's down 16, 17 pounds. Archie had a really funny line that, they've got to get Curtis Jones to gain some weight, so Deron's giving his up and Curtis is taking it, which I thought was funny. But, kind of changing the bodies of both of those freshmen now turning into sophomores is obviously going to be important, and it sounds like they're off to a really good start in that regard. Josh, as you listened to the recap of Archie's comments both to the media and to the fans, which you can get at InsideTheHall.com, what stood out to you the most listening to those?
A few things. First off, he was very on top of his game in terms of each answer he gave was pretty substantive, covered the bases, answered each question in full, and seemed to be on track in terms of where he feels the job is going, what he feels the expectations are, trying not to set the bar too high. When he was asked, I believe, by George Montgomery about where's this team going to be this season, not really putting an expectation of NCAA tournament or anything like that on the board. Another interesting thing, you mentioned the 5 guys that ended up staying in town. When Alex tweeted that, a lot of the responses were, well, that's going to be the starting 5 next year, which is an interesting thought. It very well could be. And if it is, it's great that they're getting a head start and getting some more chemistry gelling on the court with the new staff. The other thing was the excitement. I wasn't there. Alex could talk more about this because he's there. He was there, but the excitement in the room seemed to be pretty solid. There was a fan. One of the questions was just like they asked Archie, "It's Miller time. Is it Miller time?" Which Archie didn't really know how to handle that question. I found it fascinating that little give and take there. But it kind of showed the excitement among the fans towards the new regime that's taken over.
Yeah, there's so much enthusiasm right now, and I don't know, it's weird to say that you could kind of feel the enthusiasm just listening to the audio, but I felt like you could. You kind of heard, fans, kind of responding to the things that Archie would say. And look, that's natural. He's, said and done all of the right things, and it looks like he has the program pointed in a really positive direction. And I thought there were a couple other quotes of his that really stood out. Obviously, the one that's made the rounds is when he was transitioning from his prepared remarks to going into questions. He reminded everybody that he can't talk about recruiting, but that he knows where New Albany, Indiana is, which obviously got a lot of laughter and cheers from the fans in attendance, obviously referencing Romeo Langford's hometown. And then I thought, he spent a couple of minutes toward the end of his remarks talking about how, no matter what, Indiana is going to play hard. And one of the quotes was, if we play real hard, we'll figure the rest of it out. And basically said, no matter what happens, when they drag us off of the floor, you'll be proud of this team. Now, maybe, we'll need to resolve to win more games, and we'll need to, do this, that, and the other and get better, but we will play hard. And I think, look, that that works on a number of levels. Obviously, any fan base wants to know that their team is going to lay it on the line and play hard. And when you do that, fans are obviously a lot more forgiving of maybe some growing pains or, guys kind of, learning new roles and young guys getting mixed in and all of that. And even some losses when you're playing hard and it looks like you're maximizing your ability. But that also is just so important, so essential to the Archie Miller coaching philosophy. I mean, that seems like almost the most foundational principle is we're going to play hard. We'll figure out the offense, we'll figure out the defense, and we've got a plan in place for all that. But at its foundation, we're going to play hard, we're going to work hard, we're going to do things the right way. And, when you're speaking to a room full of 900 Indiana fans at Huber's Winery, I don't know that there is a room where a message like that is going to be received more warmly. So I thought that was a great message from Archie. And, it's just, there's something about hearing him talk that I just really enjoy. He doesn't use a lot of filler words. You don't hear him say a lot of likes and ums. Like, he's just very measured, very to the point. He says exactly what he wants to say. And I think, again, we've mentioned that before. That's why I think Indiana fans are responding so well to him. And now we'll see if players are responding as well as we go through the summer and into the season. But all in all, I thought a lot of positives to take away from his comments last night. Anything else for you that stood out before we jump in and start talking about some recruiting stuff?
Well, just in general, in terms of the scheduling going on further in the season or in the future, he was talking about the two potential games or series, one with Arizona, one with Kentucky, that would be going on in the future. You heard, I believe it was Glass as well, talking about how, these things are a process. It's not like Archie takes over and the next year you have a series with Kentucky, especially because IU already has the Louisville series right now. But he knows how to sort of answer that question. Fred did too. They said, I believe, within the next 5 years, they want the Kentucky series to resume and potentially an Arizona series before then, before that 5-year mark, which would be fun for a number of reasons for fans to watch, for the media to cover, an Archie Miller against Sean Miller series, potentially, I think would be very exciting, would have a lot of storylines with it, about one Miller brother sort of having the program under his wing for several years against the younger brother who's only kind of just taken over the program, similarities and differences there. And in Kentucky, the rivalry, the stories write themselves kind of there sometimes. And then the other, I guess one more takeaway was he said that the team's going to get more talent in the future. That's not the exact quote, but it was along those lines. I think that was in the speech to the 900 or so guests where he said that. And that should excite Indiana fans. The new staff, particularly Schilling and Ostrom, have been hard on the tail recruiting-wise, contacting guys very regularly, especially, high-profile names, both within the state and out of the state, and within possibly by the class of 2018, but should by the class of 2019 see some pretty highly ranked names coming into the Indiana program.
Yeah. Oh, and that's music to the ears of all IU fans. And so let's stay on that subject. Let's talk recruiting. But, there are obviously many more takeaways from Archie's comments. He talked for 35, 36 minutes to the room full of fans, and then also met with the media for about 16, 17 minutes. So listen to the rest of those at InsideTheHall.com. He had some really, really, I thought, insightful comments about Robert Johnson, about Colin Hartman, about Curtis Jones, and some of the improvements that they're making. And then, of course, we'll talk about it more on tonight's episode of the Assembly Call as well. So, Josh, let's transition now and talk about recruiting. And you actually had a really unique experience this past weekend. You were out in Los Angeles and you attended the EYBL circuit, where Indiana targets like Cole Swider and Nas Carter and Jalen Carey and Keon Brooks and others were there. Before we dive in and talk about kind of each one of those guys individually and what you saw watching them play, just describe what that kind of atmosphere is like for people like me who've never attended an event like that.
It was my second EYBL session I've attended. I was at session 2 back at the end of April in Westfield, Indiana, and this one was a different vibe in terms of there were celebrities, especially on Saturday, kind of everywhere there. A lot of NBA players. Russell Westbrook was there for a while. Chris Paul, DeMar DeRozan, and then Jay-Z, who was actually Nazia Carter's uncle, ended up coming for his second game on Saturday. That, along with that Worldwide Wes, who sat right next to him, those names turned a lot of heads, and just a lot of people. You see, which games are kind of have the stars or like the highest ranked recruits by the number of people surrounding the courts, by the energy that the fans are providing, and it was it was an experience kind of like no other, especially having it in Los Angeles. I was lucky enough. I was actually there to visit my grandparents, and this event happened to be on the same weekend. So it was a blessing that I was able to cover it and get some exclusives for Inside the Hall. But a lot of fun, and learned a lot.
Did you happen to ask Russell Westbrook why he doesn't pass more to Victor Oladipo?
Oh, he had a security team there.
Oh, did he really?
I actually tried to videotape. I was trying to do highlights on like the same half of the court he was sitting on. I tried to sit down and with my camera, and the security guard said I had to move.
Really?
So
wow,
yeah, he's got a tight team there keeping him from getting ambushed, I guess.
Wow, was that how a lot of the big name players were, or was that unique to Russell?
No, actually, Jay-Z was he didn't have any like security. He just had Worldwide Wes next to him, and I was able to film on the same. He was in the bleachers behind one of the baselines, and I was able to sit 10 feet or so away from him.
Wow. So let's talk about Jay-Z's nephew, Nas Carter. And he's become...
Yes, he does have a name. I'd like to point that out, because if you look at Twitter or like the posts that my post kind of went viral, my video that I took of him dunking over the number one recruit of 2018.
Oh, you actually took that video?
I did.
Hey,
yes.
Look at that. Okay. Very nice. That was nice work.
You see, like, SportsCenter's initial tweet about it was Jay-Z's nephew dunks, which, I mean, it's true, but he also has a name, and it's important. He told me he's trying to make a name for himself, and I think, we don't refer to Devontae Green as Danny Green's brother. I think it's important we don't refer to Nas Carter solely as Jay-Z's nephew.
Maybe we should just look, if Nas Carter ends up coming to Indiana, then we'll just refer to Jay-Z as Nas Carter's uncle, and then we'll kind of even this out a little bit. But so let's talk about Nas a little bit, because he's a name that has come on kind of the Indiana scene recently because of Grant Galen deciding to transfer. That opens up a scholarship, as Indiana only has 12 committed for next year. And for those of you who don't know the background of Nas Carter, he's from out east. Is he from Rochester, New York?
Yes.
Okay, so he's from Rochester, New York. He has basically been about a 3-star prospect. I've seen some people describe him as a 4-star prospect, but he's kind of on that fringe line, at least in terms of his current rating. But he originally signed a letter of intent with Dayton when Archie Miller was there. Now, when Archie left to take the Indiana job, he asked out of his letter of intent. That was granted, and he received that. And originally, his idea was to reclassify for the class of 2018. Well, now he's starting to get interest, from Indiana. Obviously, I think Indiana was already looking at him for 2018. Now with the scholarship open for 2017, that's a possibility. Although, from what I've heard, he's only been offered for 2018, not yet for 2017. And Archie did say at Huber's last night that he's not sure what he wants to do with that open scholarship, because it's good to have roster flexibility, and you're trying to make the best decision at a given time for your program, and so he's clearly weighing some of those options. But Nas Carter is a guy who's in the mix, perhaps for 2017, certainly as a candidate for 2018. And, my quick assessment of him, Josh, just watching highlights, and you'll have a much more in-depth assessment having watched actual games, is that he's a really good athlete. He's a tough kid who can take contact, and he's quick enough to get to the basket. He can take contact and score through contact, as he obviously did dunking over Marvin Bagley. His shot seems a little inconsistent to me. So there are some traces of Troy Williams when I watch him play, although he's not as probably fluid and explosive an athlete as Troy, but maybe 85% there. But he's a guy who, when you hear him talk, what I like about him is he talks about defense, and that was one of the things that drew him to Archie, was that commitment to defense. Yeah, defense and playing hard on defense. So he's a guy who seems to have the kind of attitude that would really fit well with what Archie's trying to build. So I know some opinions have been all over the place about whether he's a good option for Indiana. I like him, and personally, I hope he's a guy that comes and helps build the future foundation of Archie's program. But what do you think, having actually seen him play full games?
A couple words that come to mind when describing Naz Carter: fearless and ambitious. He definitely, like you said, works both ends of the court. There was one sequence that's actually in the highlight video I produced that he had 2 chase down blocks in the span of about 15 or 20 seconds, or give or take. He is kind of willing to try anything, which is it's a good thing most of the time. There was, I believe, the third game of the session, he had a few turnovers towards the end of the game. His team still won, but a couple ill-advised decisions. His ball handling is solid for a big. It still needs a bit of work. His shooting is going to need some work, but he's got a foundation there. But he's just fearless. Besides the dunk over Bagley, I mean, willing to go at big guys, like 7-foot guys. Manute Bol's son, Bol. He dunked around him. I don't want to say dunked over him. And went at him a lot throughout the game against California Supreme. He's a very willing passer, finds open guys, doesn't hurt that one of his teammates is Buddy Boeheim, Jim Boeheim's son, who also kind of broke out at this session. But he is very hard-nosed. The first thing that came to mind when I was watching him is this kind of feels like an Archie Miller prototype player, willing to do the dirty work, but also has athleticism, has a really nice skill set. And, before Session 4 was not really on the radar of a lot of major schools other than, Georgetown for 2017. Washington, he's taking a visit, I believe, in the near future. And Indiana now, and on the fans' radar too, with the dunk over Bagley. But he's been named to watch. And if Indiana doesn't get the Italian point guard David Moretti, I feel like there's a very strong chance he does get that offer for 2017 and ends up with the Indiana program.
Yeah, and David Moretti is another interesting name, and we're not going to get into him too much because he wasn't at EYBL, but there are highlights of him at InsideTheHall.com, and he was actually on a visit to Indiana just this past week. I don't know if he's still there. I think he was there Tuesday and Wednesday. And so, today's Wednesday. Yeah, so maybe he's
today's Thursday.
Today's Thursday. Okay, all the days. I have a 10-month-old at home, so all the days are running together now. But I don't think he's still in Bloomington, but he's an interesting prospect as well. And so it's really going to be interesting to see what Archie decides to do with that 2017 scholarship. And when Alex comes back next week, we'll get some of his thoughts on the latest on Moretti. But going back to EYBL, Josh, because obviously there were a lot of other players there besides Naz. And actually, one more question on Naz, because a lot of people have said, okay, he's obviously an Atlantic 10 level recruit because, he was at Dayton and that's a good level for him. Just watching him, did he strike you as a Big Ten player? I mean, obviously he has the athleticism, his skill set that you mentioned. Is it ready for Big Ten basketball or could it grow into Big Ten readiness?
It could definitely grow there. I'm not sure he's going to be, a starter at the Big Ten level. Definitely not his first few years if he stays a 2017 recruit. But he does have the potential to become a player, that plays above his size. He's just 6'6", but he plays like a guy that's 6'9" or 6'10", and ability to guard multiple positions, ability to handle the ball, pass the ball with some ease. I finish with both hands at the rim. I see, him definitely developing into at least a role player on a Big Ten team if he does go that route.
Hey, and if he does come a nice little byproduct, it couldn't hurt to have Naz Carter's uncle attend some games at Simon Scott Assembly Hall as well.
The other thing is, the puns, the Jay-Z puns. I mean, they were abundant on Twitter last couple of days, and I know, us media, we like to have some fun with the puns too, and I'm sure there'll be no shortage of them if he joins the program.
Yes, I don't doubt it. So let's talk about some other guys who were there. Cole Swider is another name that has really come on strong. From some of his comments, it sounds like Xavier is kind of the team to beat there. It certainly doesn't feel like Indiana is in a leadership position, but they're definitely in the mix, one of his final 8. And he's a guy whose reputation seems to be growing and growing. A good shooter, seems like, kind of a gritty defender type. He's tall at 6'8". What were your takeaways from watching Cole play?
Cole is, he is a pure shooter. First off, he can just hit from range consistently and in abundance. But also, like you said, he's also fits that Archie Miller mold of tough, hard-nosed, willing to, get those chase down blocks, make the right play. There was in the first game of the session, he actually off a missed free throw dove for a ball called timeout. So those kind of plays you feel like are what kind of sets him above maybe just the guys that can only their main skill is to shoot. But he's also got size. He's a big. He's pretty big for his position. He can play pretty solid defense. Like you said, Indiana doesn't seem like the favorite right now with him. Xavier's been recruiting him for longer, with the 2018 guys especially. Archie Miller and the staff is sort of having to play in a position where, they're kind of coming in with schools already on these players' radar. So it's not, I would say, more like a great chance he comes here. But if he does, he'll bring a lot to the program, and I think be an impact player from the start.
It's an important point that you bring up there, Josh, and I think it's important for all of us to remind ourselves, look, there's going to be a lot of attention paid to the recruits that Archie brings in 2018 and 2019, but I think it's really important to be patient. I was listening to a podcast right after Archie was hired. I think it was with Evan Daniels that he did, back during his Dayton days, well before Indiana was even on his radar screen. And he talked about how when you first take over a program, you can't really judge your own success, and it's not really fair for fans to judge the recruiting success those first couple of years because you're coming in and playing catch up, because a lot of programs are building relationships with guys really early on, as freshmen and sophomores, and it takes a while to play catch-up like Archie's doing now with Romeo Langford and with a guy like Keon Brooks, who we're going to discuss here in a second, like with Cole Swider. So it's really important. I think we'll see fully what Archie and his staff can do from a recruiting perspective once we start to see the class of 2020 and 2021, where they're competing with those guys on an even playing field in terms of time. So I certainly think Archie will land some good recruits in the next couple of years, and they will, leave no stone unturned and no effort ungiven to do that. But it is important just to, I think, be realistic about what's possible when you've had programs developing relationships with players for longer. So that's a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Even with assistant coaches and head coaches, these relationships take time to build, and they play a large part in players' decision making. The players who I've been talking to, the main coaches they've communicated with the IU, Miller for a lot of the players, and then Ostrom and Schilling. And Schilling's an interesting one because he came back to Indiana, he was a coach with Yogi Ferrell at Park Tudor, did a lot of stuff in the state, and now is back. And with a guy like Keon Brooks, who did not really have a relationship with Indiana, who was a 2019 guy, did not really have a relationship with Indiana before Miller took over. For him to, be interested in the program now and kind of just at the start of Miller's tenure, I do think says something about what they're trying to build.
Yeah, and there again, Keon Brooks, a guy that Michigan State was in on really early. They seem like the early leader, but there are some advantages that Indiana has with Keon Brooks that make him really interesting. I mean, he's a 5-star prospect. He's a big guy. I want to get your thoughts here in just a second on what he looked like. But again, his dad played for Ed Schilling. Has that long-term relationship, and so there are some reasons to think Indiana is in pretty good position there, even though Michigan State's been developing that relationship the longest. So we'll see. But what did you see from Keon? And what were the ages of the players here? Was he playing up a level and playing against guys older than him? He
was playing up a level. He was a 2019. He's a top 247 Sports has him as a top 20 guy, the number 1 recruit in the state for class of 2019. And the one game I really got to watch him, he faced off against a top 30 guy in the class of 2018 in Lewis King, and really held his own in that matchup. If you could even argue he won it. He's another two-way player, willing to work. I believe averages like 6 or so rebounds on the circuit, 3 of those being offensive per game.
Wow.
He's another very solid passer, willing passer on the fast break, threw some lobs, threw some lobs up, threw some lobs down as well. Really athletic. One of those fun players to watch who really works hard and is, especially on his ball handling, it's still developing, but you can see the potential there with some of those dribble moves into shots, really kind of finding his signature moves on the court. It's going to be fun to watch him develop and see where he ends up going, because Indiana is becoming a factor. I know he just received an offer over the weekend from UCLA, which is exciting, especially when you're in LA, to receive an offer from a school like that. Definitely excited him. He has a Kansas offer as well. So Indiana, competing with a lot of the titans of college basketball for Keon Brooks, but they do have a good shot at getting him.
And another name is Jalen Carey. And he's a guard, correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty good athlete, kind of a slender kid. But is he more of a point guard or a shooting guard, or kind of a combo guard?
It's a good question, because in session 1 he did he shared a lot of the ball handling duties. I'd say it was more of a shooting guard. But by session 4 this past weekend, he was doing a lot more of that ball handling, doing a lot of the passing, the brunt of the passing work in the backcourt, and has really been developing his game as well. So he's another one of those guys that can really shoot the ball, but is willing to work on both ends. And it's interesting because he said to me that one of the players he tries to mold his game after is Russell Westbrook. And then in the afternoon session Saturday, who was courtside for his game? It was Russell Westbrook. He said that that was exciting to watch that. He didn't get to chat with Westbrook, but for him, that gives a lot of motivation going forward, trying to, get on the radar of Westbrook, maybe find tutelage with him in the future.
Man, when I played summer basketball games, I thought it was cool when both my parents came and watched me play. seeing Russell Westbrook play, or having Russell Westbrook there to see you play, would be pretty sweet. And Jalen Carey, one of the names that some IU fans who have been around for a while that compare him to is Greg Graham. So I don't know if you remember Greg Graham from the early '90s.
I know who he is, but I don't really know his game.
Yeah, if you've listened to any show I've done, I mention him a lot. He was one of my favorite players growing up in my formative IU years. But that's kind of the style of Jalen Carey. So what else? I mean, I think those are kind of the names on the Indiana radar screen that were there. Is there anybody that we're missing? And what other observations did you have? You got a chance to chat with Christian Watford. I know you saw Thomas OG and Coach Crean there. What else kind of stood out to you from the event?
Yeah, the Trenton Watford's an interesting name.
I didn't realize Trenton Watford was there.
Yes.
Oh wow. So he was playing up a year too, right?
Yes, he is playing up a year as well. That was actually interesting because one of his games on Saturday, he hit a game-winning 3, at the buzzer to lift his team to a win. That actually they ended up needing. If they hadn't had that win, they wouldn't have made Peach Jam. So it was a huge shot for Watford. He's got the confidence of his brother too. He told me after that game where he hit the buzzer beater that he knew it was going in before he shot it, which his brother said he doesn't know if that's quite true.
Hey, that's what Watfords do, man. They hit big game-winning shots.
you love the confidence. Especially he wasn't having a great night going into that shot. He had like 4 or 5 points in the game, sat most of the second half, but the coach called his number, and even before the inbounds was pass was thrown, before the whistle was blown to start the play, he was kind of pretending to shoot the ball into the basket, doing the visualizations, and had the confidence that you like to see, especially in a young guy. And when you see him drain the shot like he did, you don't want to say visions of the watch shot, but it was kind of cool seeing that younger generation.
Yes, those are the visions that everybody had when you see Trendon Watford make a shot. That had to be awesome for Christian to be there to be able to see too. What a cool moment.
Actually, he wasn't there for the shot. He was there on Sunday.
Oh, he missed it.
He saw the shot. He saw the shot on video and said it was somewhat similar to the watch shot. Although him and his brother both shying away from those comparisons for good reason.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. Just let all the crazy Indiana fans make those comparisons.
Yeah.
What else? Anything else? Did you get a chance to talk with OG, Thomas, or Coach Crean? Because I know were they there just one day?
They were. Well, Crean was actually. This is interesting. Crean was there both days. I know he was also him, and I believe OG as well were also for some time at the Under Armour event. Not sure if they were at. There was an Adidas event too. That was the one with LeVar Ball, but not sure if they were. At that event, but Crean diligently taking notes, in a good mood, chatting up a lot of guys. Looks like from what he said, today or to me, and what he said on the Part of My Take podcast, which was interesting. It looks like he's going to get a TV job somewhere on some sports network within the coming weeks and months, which should be interesting to watch for. But yeah, he's looking to get back into the coaching game in the coming years. OG and Thomas, OG looked really good. Didn't have any, protection on his knee, and was walking without issue. Went to get, some food at the coffee bar, walked 2 court lengths without any problem, which I feel like I'm overanalyzing here, but
that was incredible detail. I was just thinking that as you said that. That's great reporting.
Yeah, they were both in good spirits, enjoying their time in LA. I feel like, they're both training in LA in the LA area. I believe it's a fun place to vacation, to train. The weather's beautiful. You really can't ask for more in terms of that, and the LA lifestyle is very unique, but. It was fun, and it was interesting catching up with those guys there. Just a good experience being there. A lot of content, both I put up and will be going up still between now and Friday. And on the forum as well, some of the video interviews I did with some of the recruits.
Yeah, that's right. Those are on the premium forum. So you can go to forums.insidethehall.com. If you don't have a membership to the forums, I highly recommend it. I do. I pop in there. I don't post as much, but I'm always in there, checking out the videos and some of the premium content that you and Alex are putting in there. So that stuff is very, very worthwhile. Well, Josh, thank you for all of the insight. You can follow Josh at Margolis News on Twitter. Listen to his podcast, Ball Isn't Life. And, of course, check out all of his content at InsideTheHall.com. Thanks for taking the time, Josh.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to this episode of Podcast on the Brink. We always appreciate you being here. To get more from me and from Alex, visit assemblycall.com and insidethehall.com for complete coverage of Indiana University basketball. If you liked this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend or family member who loves IU basketball as much as you do. You can also support the show by leaving a rating and review on iTunes, which helps us get the word out to more IU fans like yourself. We'll be back next week with another brand new episode. Until then, as always, go Hoosiers.